This is what an asparagus crown looks like. Hi friends, this is going to be your complete guide to growing and planting asparagus. So asparagus is one of those awesome crops that's a perennial, so you plant it once and you'll have it for years and years and years to come. There's not a whole lot of vegetables that are perennial. Rhubarb, you've got your berries, your raspberries, your blackberries, your strawberries. I'm trying to think of other veggies that, some of your herbs. Anyways, for right now, asparagus and rhubarb are the two that are coming to mind, but asparagus is awesome because you can plant it one time and harvest from it for 20, 30, I've even heard of people harvesting for 40 years. So what you need to know about starting asparagus is you're going to either start it from seed, or you can order or pick up from your local garden center bare root asparagus crowns. I think going with crowns is the way to go, because the thing with asparagus is you cannot harvest on it for roughly the first 1 to 3 years. And the reason you're going to do this is because it's really going to establish that root system. The better, the stronger, the healthier the root system, the more asparagus you'll be able to harvest off them in the long run. So those first 1, 2 years, you don't harvest on them. The second year, you could probably harvest a couple spears just to try it. The third year, you could harvest probably a small handful, and then beyond that, you can harvest for weeks and weeks on end. Generally, the harvest is in the early spring. For most people, it's going to be either March and April or April and May, depending on what kind of climate you live in. It's really important to not harvest on that asparagus those first couple of years, just so you can let the plant establish. A good way to kill your asparagus is by harvesting it when it's really young, those first 1 to 2 years. If you harvest all your asparagus, you're going to basically kill it and it's not going to come back for you strong. But if you can just be patient and wait 1 to 3 years after you plant it to get your harvest, you will be set for a long time. It is a crop that just pays you in dividends in the long run. So because of that, growing it from seed is a great option for affordability, but you will have to invest even more time on the front end waiting for it to mature. So most of the time you can order crowns online that are either 1 or 2 years old, and you can also pick them up at your nursery, especially if it's a nursery that tends to sell onion sets or any type of crop in the springtime. But basically they're going to be shipped to you like this, and they are bare root crowns. So let's take a look at what that looks like close up. Now these have been soaking in some water for about 20 minutes, which I definitely suggest you do before you plant any type of bare root plant. You can see these crowns are already starting to break dormancy, and these are little baby asparagus coming up. So that's actually awesome for you guys, because you can see exactly where the top of the crown is. So each one of these little clusters is a single plant. This is a bunch of 10, and it's going to shoot up from that crown all of your asparagus, just like that. Pretty cool, huh? All right, so after you've decided on how you're going to start your asparagus, whether from seed or from a bare root crown, the next step is choosing your location. Because this is a perennial crop, one that comes back year after year, you're going to want to choose a spot that you want it for the long term. Of course, you can always transplant it, but it's just so much easier if you just can plant it once and forget about it. Asparagus needs at least 6 to 8 hours of sunlight, preferably a well-draining, soft, loamy soil. Of course, not everybody has that, so you can grow them in raised beds. You can even grow them in containers and grow bags I've seen people use. I actually started this patch of asparagus behind me in grow bags last year because I wanted to get my crowns planted, and we did not yet have our raised beds built. So I put all of these, which I believe was 20 crowns, in 3 different grow bags, and they did phenomenal. And then I transplanted them in the fall into this raised bed garden. So the other thing to keep in mind is asparagus gets tall, extremely tall, upwards of like 6, 7, 8 feet tall. And a lot of people don't know that this is what it looks like at the top. And this is the asparagus fern, and it can get big and bulky. So choose a spot where you can allow it to get tall. Asparagus is typically hardy in zones 3 through 8. It's a great crop for those that live in really cooler climates. It's extremely cold hardy. There are a few varieties that actually can grow in warmer zones. I have 2 of those. Millennium asparagus, which I'm starting today, and all of these are also Millennium asparagus, is hardy in zones 3 through 9. And then Purple Passion asparagus is hardy in zones 3 through 10. So if you live in a warm 8, 9, 10 zone, Purple Passion is a great one. It is a purple asparagus. It turns green once you cook it. It's sweeter than a typical asparagus. It's a very vigorous grower too. So a good option for those of you in warm climates. I wanted to add more asparagus to my garden simply because I wanted to try the purple passion variety. This is Millennium asparagus, and I wanted just more. We love asparagus. I did harvest a couple of these earlier this spring and tried them, and they are so tender. We ate them raw just out here in the garden. It was delicious. So because I realized that we just want to have a ton of asparagus, I wanted to put a few more crowns in. So I'm doing, I think, a total of 20 more Millennium asparagus crowns and then 20 of the purple passion. Ideally, you want to space your asparagus crowns about 12 to 18 inches apart is ideal. Like I said, last year I did them in grow bags and they were planted about 10 inches apart and they did fantastic. I've got my asparagus crowns soaking in this bucket of water. They're ready to be planted. I need to go prepare the soil, so I'll show you how we do that. In case you've never seen asparagus and what it looks like when you are not harvesting on it and you let it grow fully up to the fern, this is what it looks like. And it just gets these really soft little fern-like foliage. It's very tall. It's really kind of pretty. You just need a space that can allow it to really get tall like this. When you go to harvest your asparagus, when it's finally time, you've waited those, 2 to 3 years and it's ready to harvest, what you're going to do is you're going to want to harvest your asparagus when it's much smaller than this. So your stalk will probably be, 10 to 12 inches above the ground. And when you come in here to harvest, you want to either break it or snip it above the soil level. Don't come down here and try and snip it really low because you can damage the crown. And if you damage your crown, you can damage all future production of your asparagus. So just something to note when it is time to harvest, try and harvest it above the soil line. You're going to want to come in and create about a 6 to 8 inch wide trench that is also about 6 to 10 inches deep, and it's going to run this whole length. And then in the middle of that, we're going to create little mounds that we're going to rest the asparagus crowns on, and then the roots will go down deeper into the trench. I know that sounds a little confusing, so I'll show you how I do it. It's going to be a little difficult for me because I do have the asparagus already planted here, and I'm going to try to avoid the existing roots and crowns the best I can. Hopefully I don't do any damage. I'm just going to get in here and turn over my soil, loosen it up. You guys, I just found a grub. We have such bad Japanese beetles here. I'm sure this is probably a Japanese beetle grub. So I know it's terrible, but I smush them and then leave them for the birds to eat. I know it's kind of hard to tell, but I have my trenches made here. And now what I'm going to go back and do is kind of create a little mound in the middle for each asparagus crown to sit on, and then the roots will kind of go over the mound and kind of drape down. I'll show you. Here are all the little mounds that I created. You can tell that there's just like a little hill, and each one is about 12 inches apart. And the top of the mound is still a little bit less than 6 inches below the soil line. And so we are just going to lay our crowns right on top of that mound and spread their roots all around. This is the Millennium asparagus. I'm going to try and carefully separate them. So ideally you have crowns that have not yet broken dormancy, but these, for whatever reason, have already broken dormancy, but not a big deal. We will make it work. This is the crown, and you can kind of see it looks just kind of like some sort of tentacled octopus or something. So you're going to do your best to kind of spread those roots out and plant them right on top of the mound. You're going to take your crown, and the side that where all the roots are connected is the top. That's the crown. And you're just going to kind of gently spread the roots apart and place the top of that crown on top of that mound. And this mound is just giving the roots support to kind of spread out. And then take your next one and work your way down. And it is totally okay if the roots from each crown touch. In fact, they most likely will. In true Joanna fashion, I forgot to fertilize as I was working my soil, turning it over and work the fertilizer in. But if you're like me and forget, it's better to remember at some stage of the process than never do it at all. So I'm just going to go along and just kind of side dress all the asparagus with some garden tone. I'm just using Espoma's garden tone, which is a 3-4-4. Any kind of well-balanced generic starter fertilizer or vegetable fertilizer would work great. So I'm just going to go ahead in and fertilize around all the plants, and then I want to show you how we're going to bury them. Should note, because this is a slow release organic fertilizer, it's not going to burn these plants in any way by sprinkling it directly next to them. The next thing to do when it's time to actually cover up and bury your plants is you want to only cover the crowns with about 2 inches of soil. We're going to do something similar to what you do with your potatoes. We're going to hill them. So we're going to cover them with about 2 inches of soil. In about 2 weeks' time, when they start pushing a little bit of growth, come back and add some more soil to that. Over time, asparagus crowns can kind of push their way to the surface. And unlike bare root strawberry crowns, where you want the crown above the soil, you really want the crown of the asparagus below the soil to protect it. It's just what it needs. So by mounding it gently, we create that. We allow the plant to break dormancy, come up, and then we just slowly add more soil till we get to the point where the soil level above the plant is equal to what the rest of your soil level is. So it might take 2 or 3 times coming out and hilling and adding that soil over top, but it's just better to do it that way than to completely bury them all at once. So let me show you here with this one. I'm just going to come in and take some of the soil around it. And bury it. And I don't know if you can tell, but this is the soil level now for this particular plant, and my existing soil level is up here. So it's still below the soil level, and it only has probably about 1.5 inches, 2 inches of soil over the crown. All the asparagus is covered up and planted, and you can see, if you look here closely, oops, sorry about that, you can see how there's still kind of a trough, and this is where the asparagus is planted, and I didn't plant it or cover it completely back to the normal soil level. So I'll leave it like this. In 2 weeks, I'll come back and I'll add more of the soil from around here and top it up, and probably need to do that 2 more times, or 2 times total. Come back like 2 weeks after that and add a little bit more soil, and then everything will be back up to the normal soil line. So you can kind of see it still kind of looks like a trough. Got my irrigation above the area. You can kind of tell a little bit better down here. That's it. It's really that simple to start your asparagus from bare root crowns. I chose the Millennium variety, and I wanted to make note. The reason is because Millennium is known to do better in clay soils. I do have very compacted clay soil underneath these raised beds, so as the asparagus starts to root down and get into our native soil, it will encounter very compacted clay soil. So if you have clay soil, maybe consider the Millennium variety. I know there is Mary Washington, and Jersey, I believe. Those are the other really common varieties. I'm excited to try this purple passion and just see how vigorous it actually is. And I think it'd just be kind of cool to have purple asparagus growing in the garden. I hope you found this guide to growing and planting asparagus helpful. If you did, please like the video. And if you have any tips for growing asparagus, put them in the comments below so we can all learn from each other. Asparagus is really nostalgic for me. It's another one of those plants that just reminds me of my grandmother. She had it growing at the back of her property, and I remember as a child just being amazed at what asparagus ferns looked like. I had no idea what asparagus actually looked like growing in the ground, and it's such a cool plant. I really appreciate you watching today, and thanks for gardening with me.